Hello and welcome back to my series of podcasts about people with purpose. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Sarah McGuire, an estate planning consultant based in Chatham and Kent. Sarah specialises in helping people with setting up wills, lasting powers of attorney, and funeral plans. Not exactly the light or easy subject to cover today, but Sarah's purpose is very much about taking the fear out of those processes and also empowering people to feel in control over their decisions so that whilst they're alive that they're in control, and also after they've gone that their assets are sort of going to the right places and the right people so their loved ones are taken care of. I know this is a bit of a dark subject, but Sarah is an expert in all of this, so I'm looking forward to actually digging deep to finding out a little bit more about what she does. So Sarah, glad you've come on board today. How are you feeling?
Good, thank you. Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. It won't be too dark, don't worry. We'll make it fine.
I know it won't be, but people listening might actually think, oh, I don't know if I want to listen to this one, but I think this is going to be quite an interesting one to cover. So can you just, for anybody sort of listening or watching, tell us a little bit about what you do, what wills are, lasting and powers of attorneys, because not everybody knows this stuff, and it'd be just an interesting way of actually sort of starting the conversation.
Start with the basics. A will is what you need after you're dead. So basically, I will meet with clients, have a chat with them about what they want to happen. So to ensure that their wishes are met when they're no longer around. So whether that means protecting their spouse or maximising inheritance for their children or stopping that inheritance going where they don't want it to go. And that's the essence of it, is to keep them in control. Lasting power of attorney, also keeping people in control, but while you're alive. So there's a difference between a will and a lasting power of attorney. Wills deal with everything when you're dead. Lasting power of attorneys when you're alive, to keep you in control of decisions, but if you're no longer able to. So if you lose capacity temporarily or permanently, people tend to think that's when you've got dementia or something, but also can be stroke or serious injury or something like that. But it enables the people that you love and trust to make decisions on your behalf in your best interests with regards to finance and health and welfare if you're no longer able to do them. And that is it in a nutshell, hopefully.
I mean, it's one of those things that I think is very much not a taboo subject, but it's one of those things that I think, and I'm probably as guilty as the next person, it's, oh, I must do that, but something else comes along, and life carries on, and you don't actually ever get around to doing it. Is that something that you find?
Yeah, funny enough, I was talking about this to someone the other day, and we were saying that it's something your class is important but not urgent. So it's important to do it, to make sure, particularly if you're in a fractured family situation or you've got significant assets, it's important, but it's something you can put off because you haven't got a finite end date of when it must be done. But in a way, you kind of need to flip that, because you kind of have, but you just don't know it, which is even worse, which makes it even more urgent. And particularly with people, they tend to get prompted to do their will if they've had a significant loss of, say, parents, or in terms of sorting out lasting power of attorney, if they've been through that situation of seeing a loved one who's lost capacity and they haven't got one in place, that sort of spurs them to do it. But yeah, it's trying to get that message across that because you don't know when either of those events are going to happen, you want to really get it set up now and class it as important and urgent now, not pushing it off. But I totally understand it. I mean, if people have got money to spend, especially coming up to Christmas, they're not going to think, oh, we'll necessarily go out and buy a will with it. They're going to go and get Christmas presents, aren't they? We all are. So I do appreciate that thought, definitely.
I think it's that. I guess it's proactive versus reactive.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that you can't do anything about it once you've gone either.
Yeah, too late. Yeah,
It's too late by then to actually.
yes, yeah.
How on earth did you get into this? What was your what's your backstory for doing it?
Well, it's a weird one with me. There's kind of two mainstreams. I've always had a phobia of death, so it just means that it's the most unlikely career that I would ever end up in. But that's life, isn't it? And I suppose that's one of the reasons behind I do what I do, is because I try to make sure that other people haven't got the same fears that I've had. but also it's just generally my background, my previous work experience. I worked in different forms of housing all through my life with adults with learning difficulties, children under fives, children in foster care and leaving foster care. And then the last 12 years I spent managing leasehold and rented housing schemes for over 55s. So with that, it was blocks of flats. Over 55s would rent or buy flats, and I'll be dealing with managing the building, budgets, repairs, and antisocial behaviour of tenants and things like that. People don't realise over 55s misbehave, but they really do. But through that work, obviously you get to know the things that people worry about, and particularly as they get older. So for a lot of people, the fears are around losing independence, becoming a burden, loss of control over decisions around their welfare, where they're living, control of their money, and being more vulnerable to people taking advantage of them. And also things like reconciling with relatives that they've lost contact with, or wanting to ensure that relatives that have treated them badly aren't going to benefit when they die. So I think having all those sorts of conversations led to what I do. And I happened to have a tenant there who we got talking one day, and she was working part-time as an estate planner. And so we sort of talked about it, and my career in housing had got a bit stagnant by that time. So it was something I was quite interested in moving away from housing. Sorry, dog's just choking in the background. God. And yeah, so I did the will writing course and took an exam and passed. So I started off doing the wills about 2 years ago, and so that's how I moved totally into doing the wills now, because I've left the housing job beginning of this year actually. So that's it in sweet but short summary of how I got into it.
So it was beginning of this year, so before.
Yes, I've been doing the wills part-time for a couple of years, but I left my housing job. I was doing it alongside my housing job, because I worked part-time in housing as well. But I left the housing job just in February, mid-February, just before COVID. So great timing. So since then I've been doing it solely during the wills, and long may it last.
Well, yeah, definitely. And it's, I suppose, in one sense, and we might as well broach the subject. COVID has obviously affected the way we do business, the way things are done, and also the issue that there's obviously been a lot more unexpected passings, people dying. Have you seen that? Have you seen the effect of that in the industry?
I wouldn't say I have actually. In terms of the practicalities of how we do the work, yes, because it would normally, previously, more or less all my clients would have been face to face, whereas now we see a lot more over Zoom. Although for my older clients, they do tend to still prefer a face to face visit, and I totally understand that if you're talking about personal stuff or complicated things. But generally, in terms of prompting people to get their will, possibly not quite. And I know it's not just me, because I thought it might just be me, but talking to other estate planners reporting the same sorts of things as well, and it hadn't been that. It was almost like the COVID thing was too much in people's faces, so it was like, I don't know, that they couldn't go straight out and think about doing a will. Hopefully, possibly seen an increase in lasting power of attorneys because of it, because I think that, like, quite big publicity cases, is it Kate Garraway, the breakfast TV presenter? Her husband got COVID and was I think he still is in intensive care. And I think she'd spoke about the difficulties with not having lasting power of attorney in place. So you're getting more awareness of that, which obviously in turn leads to the way we're dealing with clients changing.
Is this something that you set up yourself, or are you part of a franchise, or how does it work?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I do work for a company at the moment. Oh, excuse me, my voice is going now. I do work for a company at the moment. My long-term aim, obviously, is to hopefully have my own will writing business. But I just think in terms of building up technical knowledge, it's quite useful to work with other people. But obviously, I go out and see the clients and advise them on what they need. And then the company draft the actual wills, and I'll go back out and do what we call the attestation, which is where the client checks the will and signs it in the presence of two witnesses, because it's not valid until it's signed and dated in front of your witnesses.
How much training does it take to become a will writer? Is there a course that you can go on?
Yeah. There's a will writing course, and there's an exam at the end of it. I think there are people out there who haven't taken the exam. You know, in theory, we're all members of, we choose to be members of regulated bodies. So I'm with the Institute of Professional Will Writers, but there's also the Society of Will Writers. But I'm sure there's some unscrupulous people out there who aren't members of both. But I wouldn't recommend any client using someone who isn't. Because then obviously there's ongoing training following the course, and obviously within my company, because the more technical knowledge you've got, the better the service and the advice that you can give to clients.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, is this something you do on your own? Obviously you work with a company who help you
Mm-hmm.
do stuff, but do you have other people that you can refer stuff to, or
Yes. Yeah, no. I mean, I'm on my own when I go out and about to clients. But yeah, if I'm with a client or I speak to them and I'm thinking I'm not sure quite what the best way forward for their will is, then just ring the office and they give me a bit of advice. So dog's coughing and spluttering again.
Has your dog got a will?
I don't know what's up with her. She doesn't normally do this. She's a bit of a drama queen. She's probably getting upset she's not been given any attention right now.
Yeah, she wants to be on the podcast as
That's
well.
right. Yeah.
So has anybody, you were working in housing, you felt this need, you wanted to help people in this way. But is there anybody that's helped you along the way? Is there anybody that's inspired you to do this?
Oh dear. Yeah, I think like with all of us, loads of people. So many people. There was there's a lady in my last company who I'm friends with now, and she had a lot of confidence in me that you don't always see in yourself. And so yeah, give a shout out to Lisa. But generally, I've found, because I've through the work, obviously need to generate my own leads and clients. So then do a lot of networking and belong to 3 different networking groups. And I found the advice and the support invaluable through all of those. And just to be out there meeting other people who are also out there, not working in the usual 9 to 5, just meeting lots of different people, seeing how they do things and the challenges they've overcome. It's really inspirational.
Yeah, sorry. I think networking for me has been a big part of my last sort of few years in business. It's just been so good, and that's obviously how I met you through networking groups. And I know you briefly mentioned it because you started doing this full time in February. But what has that what's the last year been like? How have you, how do you see things have progressed over the last year? How's, is business good? I don't mean that in a really negative way, because that sounds
I have. You're not the first to say. I've had so many people say to me, "Oh, your business must be booming." And I would say to people, we have to see the clients before they die. There's no good people dying and then contacting us. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of how the business has gone, it was very quiet the March to June periods, because I think a lot of people didn't realise estate planners were still classed as key workers and we could still work. So everything just sort of shut down for a while. But yeah, it's definitely picked up, and I think possibly seeing younger clients coming through now, and that might be a consequence of the COVID situation. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it might have something to do with it, definitely. I would say generally beforehand, clients typically were in their kind of late 50s, 60s, whereas I'm definitely seeing younger people coming through, and also without being too wordist about it, but seeing more people, that the effect of being in lockdown for 3 months with someone, if your relationship isn't that great, obviously relationships break up. And then I've had quite a few people come to me who are now separated or on the verge of divorce, who need definitely to change their will. So it's an unexpected consequence, maybe.
Yeah, I'm glad you said consequence there. I thought you were going to say benefit for a moment.
No, not at all. No, contrary to what people think, I'm not quite that cynical.
No, not at all. Actually, one thing I wanted to sort of talk to you about was your approach to awareness for what you do. And one of the big things that I've sort of followed you through is your activity on LinkedIn. Your posts are not what you would typically expect from someone who's dealing in death and dying. There's always a lot of humor that you bring into it, and I think that's quite fascinating. Is that done on purpose, or is that just you as a person?
Yeah, no, there was never a strategy to do that. It was kind of me starting off being myself. My little hashtag putting the fun back into dying. That's what came about. I don't know how that evolved. But yeah, I started writing on LinkedIn beginning of the year. It was a bit rubbish to start with. I think because like all of us, I was quite self-conscious, wasn't really being me. I was being who I thought I should be on there. And then I'm connected to lots of other estate planners and lots of them post, but they are different to me. And particularly when you go on training, you see it a lot that the typical estate planner is kind of grey-haired, grey-suited man in his 60s in a suit. It's not me. So it's just through my personality, I think it's come up. I've remembered how much I really enjoy writing, and I'd forgotten that. I think that I used to write when I did my A levels was the last time I wrote creatively.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed bringing my kind of warped sense of humour into the writing process, and then to sort of have those analogies and those little tie-ins with death that people wouldn't expect it to make it more than your normal kind of quite boring post about you must get a will, because people know they should get a will, but it doesn't bring it alive for them, does it? It's the wrong pun to use with death, isn't it? But yeah, so that's, I wouldn't say it's a strategy as such, but it's developed more into one as I've gone on, maybe.
Yeah, I just think that I've never seen anything like it in terms of, as you say, it is very unique. I mean, that would have been something I would have asked you about. What do you think's unique about the way that you approach it? And it's a really strange one to deal with, isn't it? Mixing humor analogies with death and dying.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky line to walk, and I'm conscious of that because I don't want to come across as insensitive, because I'm well aware that if you've lost a loved one, it's horrible. I've been through it before with my dad, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And also I'm aware, because I've got my own phobia about death, that I'm aware that lots of other people also have. But I think that's probably why I'm quite brash about it, because it's sort of like, well, you can laugh or cry, can't you? So you might as well laugh. So that's kind of where it's come from. Yeah.
As in, have you actually had any problems with it? Has anybody actually said anything negative
Uh,
about the way
not
that you?
no, not no. I haven't on LinkedIn. Possibly one comment maybe, but I did try posting on Facebook, and didn't go down well. It didn't go down well, Graham. The same sort of post that I can write on LinkedIn, I'd put on Facebook, and I just got like, oh my God, I'd never want this woman to write a will for me, and like horrific comments. So yeah, I've kind of backed off, and it's on my to-do list to go back on there and try, but I think it might need a different approach.
That's interesting, isn't it? The fact that on one platform it seems to work very, very well, but other platforms not. I mean, that's a good point for anybody listening about sort of social media in itself. I mean, as I said, when I follow your posts, and they are very, very, very well written and funny, and there is an appeal to it, and it's actually made me, think. And I've said to other people, check out Sarah's post, because it makes you think about the thing that we put off the most, but it adds a little bit of humor to it. It makes it a little bit easier to sort of digest. I guess is probably the best way of putting it. Is that fair to
Yeah.
say?
Yes, I think it's about being able to broach that subject, isn't it, with people, and particularly in terms of how they might be thinking of broaching it with their partner, or if they're thinking about suggesting to a parent that they might need to think about lasting power of attorney. It's about giving them a way in. Maybe it doesn't have to be a kind of, oh, let's sit down and get the clipboard out and have a serious discussion about this. It can be like a bit of a jokey throwaway comment, or like I say, an analogy to compare it to something else that maybe makes it easier to understand the benefit of having it in place. That's the tactic.
Yeah. I mean, is that something that you want to expand on? You said you wanted to move to become more independent from the period. Things like bringing some of that humor into a website. As you said, although Facebook, it didn't work.
Um, I think it would have to, have some of my personality in it. But I suppose there's also a danger if someone lands on your website without first knowing a bit about you and how you broach it, that they could initially be quite put off by that approach, because they could just think. And I think I'm also very wary of just being seen. I don't want to be seen just as a comedy turn. But yeah, it's nice to be able to write funny funny things about it. But at the end of the day, I'm quite serious when I'm with my clients. I'm not taking the mickey out of them. If they're worried or if they've got situations, skeleton in the closet, then I would hope I'm always quite sympathetic and empathic and sensitive to their concerns. So I think it's trying to balance that, isn't it? But yeah, it's nice to be a bit funny. And we have a laugh when I'm with my clients. They'll always say, "Oh, yeah, that was enjoyable. Didn't expect to have a laugh doing it." But at the same time, I would hope they feel that I've taken their wishes seriously. It's not just a funny 5 minutes for me. It is a serious business at the end of the day.
Well, it absolutely is. It's hugely important to have and get right. But I said, what I'm saying is that humour can break the initial ice, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I do get people ring me off the back of particularly the LinkedIn posts and saying, well, I like the way you write, made me laugh, and so I remembered your name and give you a ring because of it. So it's working.
Definitely. I mean, in terms of right now, what would your, obviously, other than writing a will and or getting a lasting power of attorney, what's the main issues that you see on a day-to-day basis? What's the biggest bit of wisdom that you can share with us today?
Um, this is a bit of a side tangent, and then I try to get through it without getting blubby. But I would say to people to think about how they store any of these documents, and it might sound a bit of a weird thing to say, but you've got to be able to find it when you need it. And so many people I do wills for, and they might have had one done previously and then forgotten all about it. Don't know where it is, and you just think, well, gosh, lucky you didn't die in the meantime because you needed it. But from a personal perspective, when my dad was very poorly, he had a horrible terminal lung condition, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, if you can pronounce it. So he knew he was dying and he deteriorated. So he got very private, my mum and dad. So he never spoke to us about any of this, but got wills in place and things like that. And he'd got I think it's called a DNAR now, but basically do not resuscitate thing he'd got set up because there was no point resuscitating him because he was struggling to breathe as it was. But the morning he died, and I didn't know he'd got one of these documents, the morning he died, my mum rang me and said, "Oh, your dad's..." Well, first of all, she rang, "So your dad wants you to come over and see him." I kind of knew it was very near the end. And then she rang again half an hour later and said, "Oh, I think your dad's just died." And she hadn't kind of stressed the urgency of it. It wasn't her fault. But when she said, "Oh, I think he's just died," so I kind of legged it over there to their house, and sure enough, he was kind of the neighbour was round trying to give him CPR and a first responder, and then I took over and was giving him CPR, and then after about 10 minutes of this, while we were still waiting for the ambulance, my mum suddenly piped up, "Oh, your dad's got one of those documents, so basically doesn't want to be resuscitated." And my dad was the most meticulous man. Everything was always kept in order in a set place. Couldn't find the bloody document. So, going through all the drawers, and I did find it in the end in a drawer in his bedroom. It wasn't where he normally kept it. And then once we found it, obviously they could stop working on him. And I tell the story because my dad was really private and really quiet, dignified man, and he would have hated the thought that on that last morning there was me, the first responder, two ambulance people, my mum, all in the room. When he was dead. Just seeing him there like that. So that's my big thing. Seeing as you asked, I don't know if it's quite the question or the answer that you meant, but that would be my thing, to people to think about what they're doing with these documents and to tell loved ones if they've got them.
Not at all. I mean, that's actually a really important lesson, I think, to actually sort of, and I'm very grateful to share something that's obviously quite personal to you. And it's really important to do that. And I actually have, although I haven't come to that point in the story, if you like, but I have had a similar situation where documents we couldn't find them, or we were worried about where documents were that were very much needed. Luckily, we found them and it's all been sorted out. But I do really see that as quite an important one to think about, because it's all very well. You say you could turn around and said, my best advice to you is to get a will, get a lasting power of attorney. Not, it's about the simple.
It doesn't stop there. No, and same thing with if you've got a will, and people do these ones themselves. I wouldn't recommend it because they don't cover all the sorts of things you need to cover. But if you've got a will, make sure you've signed it because it's not valid. Make sure you sign it in front of two witnesses because otherwise you've gone through all that expense of doing it and possibly paying for it. And then if you can't be found that it's not valid, there's no point doing it. And the same thing with I'd say with my company, you pay for us to store it and then you can amend it when you need to and it's kept securely. But if you're going to store it yourself, you can. But again, make sure it's stored somewhere secure and that you've told your executors where it is because you need the original. So there's no point putting yourself through that hassle. And then, if you can't be found, it can't be found. And then you're going to have the laws of intestacy decide who gets everything after all that. So, yes, I'm a bit passionate about that.
No, it's a very, I'm glad you said you told that story. You just said something in there. What happens if you haven't got a will? Then what happens if you haven't got this protection in place?
Okay.
Who decides?
Government, and the same with lasting power of attorney. So yeah, under the laws of intestacy, if you die without a will, if you're married, the first 270,000 goes to your spouse, and then the remainder is split between your children if you have them. If you're not married, and that can mean you might be living with a partner, but they're not entitled to anything. So for things like that, or if you have people who are married and then they've separated, but without that will in place, putting an exclusion clause in, their estranged partner is still going to get everything. So it's really important. And also, so with the lasting power of attorney, and I've got this argument going on with my mum at the moment. I don't speak to her about it very often, and it's unfortunate because, you think I should be the prime candidate for being able to get her to get a lasting power of attorney, but she doesn't like the thought of giving up her independence and having a lasting power of attorney that someone can then make decisions for her. But I'm trying to get through to her that the very fact of not having a lasting power of attorney is that you're letting the government decide what happens to your finances and your health and welfare, what care home you might end up in, because you haven't appointed someone you trust, and the government will appoint someone through the courts to make those decisions. But it might not be the person you want. So really, in terms again of having control over everything, that's unless you want the government, you might be quite happy to let the government make these decisions, but for most people they really aren't.
That's a really interesting point, actually, that that sort of the fear of giving up your independence, yet it's going to happen anyway.
Exactly, yeah, and it's a choice, and it's just a different way of looking at it, is it? Because people think, if I have people who put off doing a will because they can't decide who'd be guardian for their child. But if you haven't got a will, then the courts will decide. And do you want the court deciding, or do you want someone, yourself, who's the best person to choose to make the decision and appoint the person that you feel is the best person to be guardian, rather than the government choosing someone? You kind of have to look at it like that, like you say, rather than thinking, I've got to lose my independence or make a difficult decision.
Yeah, but I guess you're not losing your independence whilst you're making that decision. It's
only gaining it. Yeah.
When that happens, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
This actually just made me think of another question about there's different types of wills. There's
certainly are.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the top few? What's the main differences?
I'll run through the main differences. So my boss has a really good analogy not analogy, but the way his script that he uses. So basically, he says there's 4 different types of will. Right. So there's the first will is no will, and that is a will because it's the government, like I've just said, that's the government deciding where your assets go. And the second kind of will is probably the will that most people think of when they think of a will. It's a basic will, and basically that's just what we would call an expression of wishes. So I'd like everything to go to my husband and then to my children when I'm dead. But there's no protection in there. So for protection, you need what we call a trust-based will. And the trust gets set up on what we call first death. So if you're married, when the first person dies, a trust gets set up. And what that does, it gives you some protection, because without that protection, if you own a house jointly with your partner and one of you dies, the spouse who's surviving inherits all the house. But if they then remarry and don't write a will, or just rewrite a new will after you've died, then that 100% of the house can go sideways to their new beneficiaries, loved ones, spouse, and your kids don't get anything. So there's no protection. Whereas having a trust-based will that's set up on first death, splits the way you own the house into half, and the first half of the house goes into trust for the children, but only receive it on the second spouse's death. But ultimately, it protects half of that estate and also gives some protection if the surviving spouse needs to go into care, because the local authority can only look to pay for their care with the 50% of the house that's in the name rather than the 100% of the house that they would otherwise own. So that's the third type of will. And then there's other trusts that you can have in wills to protect vulnerable beneficiaries, so if you've got a disabled child, say, or to protect long-term the future of the estate. There's different types of trusts you can have. And then the fourth and final type, which is only suitable for some people, you need to be mortgage-free and in good health, not showing any signs of needing any kind of care, but you can have a lifetime trust, which gives 100% protection to the estate because it's set up while you're alive. You nominate beneficiaries, and the whole of your assets can go into trust, and that can avoid it can avoid care fees, but it shouldn't be used to avoid care fees. That's just a subsequent benefit of it. So it's avoiding probate delays and costs because you don't need to go through probate once you've both passed away. And then it has the added benefit that possibly can avoid some kind of care fees. But like I say, you can't be doing it for the sole purpose of avoiding care, because the local authorities, they're not stupid. So they know why people try to do these things. And they want this, they want their fees to be paid, which you can understand.
No.
So yeah, that was the long answer, sorry, to your short question. Four types of will.
Which one of those is, would you, is it the third one, that a trust-based will?
Trust-based will suitable for most types of people. It would be the one that I would recommend. Not everyone needs one. If you're single, you haven't got much in the way of assets, then a basic will's fine. But for most people, once you're married, once you've got children or other beneficiaries, particularly if they're people coming together with children from one relationship and another, then quite naturally people want to protect those children. Or if someone who owns a house on their own and they've got kids, and then they find a partner and the partner moves in, they ultimately want their own kids still to inherit that house, but they want the partner to have the right to live in that house for a while after they've gone, maybe, or something like that. So I would say definitely a trust-based will for most people.
Okay. And is that, you talk a lot about sort of like when people get married and things, but would a trust-based will still apply if it's just two people living together?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. So if you're living together and you own a house together, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's irrelevant of whether they're married or not married, or
no, you can still have trust-based will, definitely. Okay. Highly recommended.
That's interesting. The other thing was, and I have actually had a discussion before with you about it, but lasting power of attorney, that's to do with capacity, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when someone's alive, you're fit and healthy now, you're looking into the future thinking, well, maybe in the future I might not be able to make certain decisions around health and welfare, finances, so I want to appoint someone now so that if the need ever arose in the future, that person could be called on to act in my best interest. And they can't be set up once someone's already lost capacity. And unfortunately, I do have people ringing me saying, oh, mum's got dementia, she's forgetting things, so we need a lasting power of attorney. And by then it's kind of quite often too late, because if someone's already lost capacity, obviously they then can't consent to having this set up for them. So really something you need to broach well before. And I say it's not always for dementia, obviously. So it can be, people have strokes, people have horrific car accidents, head injuries, nasty illnesses that all result in them losing capacity. So having these documents in place, and particularly if you've got a business as well, can mean that the business can carry on running. If you're, say you might only be off work for 6 months, lose capacity for part of that, but it means that the business can carry on running.
How is it decided when someone has capacity or not capacity? You talk about it's too late when they're in that position.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that decision get made? Is it sort of like a medical advice? Or?
Yeah, so normally you must always assume that someone has capacity unless proved otherwise. But you can have kind of fluctuating capacity, or you might be able to decide what you want to wear today, but you might not know how much is in the bank or what you want to spend it on, or vice versa. So depending, you have to be quite careful about at which point someone hasn't got the ability. And also there's a difference between someone making an unwise decision and someone not having capacity, because, you know, Auntie Ada, 95, she might go and blow all her money in the bank. We might, it doesn't mean to say that she's not got the capacity to make it. So once you've got these documents up and running, usually, yeah, it would be doctors assessed, say, under the Mental Capacity Act, this person hasn't got capacity to make their own decisions. But yeah, it wouldn't be just someone saying, "Oh, she's a bit forgetful, so we can start making decisions for her," because it's not fair. With a financial lasting power of attorney, you can, the person setting up the document can have something in there to say, well, actually, I don't mind someone acting for me before I've lost capacity. And quite often that's useful for, I've got frail clients who are quite sharp mentally, but they struggle to go out and do their banking or pay their bills and things like that, or they get flustered with it. So then they've got one of these documents set up that a loved one can do those things for them. Whereas the health and welfare lasting power of attorney, definitely it's not permissible to use that all the time someone's got capacity, because obviously you don't want to have someone who's not very pleasant deciding to put Auntie Ada into a care home when she she doesn't want to go and she's got capacity, so they can't be used like that.
Right. And so that, just correct me if I'm saying there's two different types.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, yeah, maybe should have clarified that. Yeah, so there's one for finance and property and the other one is for health and welfare decisions. But most people obviously always advise, if you're going to do one, you might as well set both up at the same time, because otherwise most things, there's quite a lot of overlap, isn't there? You know, my health and welfare decisions quite often involve financial costs to them, so you need both documents.
We've talked a bit about, you know, where you started and what's going on at the moment. What's the future hold for you? What's your plan?
The future's bright, Graham. I don't know. I want, you know, like I say, I'd like to have my own business and I'm not someone who's got definite plans for what I want in, say, 3-5 years' time. I'd like to think I'm had a good reputation and that people know they can come to me for advice, that they're going to get sensible advice and financial planning help in terms of their estate. But further than that, I couldn't really say. It's all waiting to be discovered, isn't it? I'm quite positive like that. I think it's all an adventure, isn't it?
You're about the journey, not the destination.
I think so, yes. Yeah, I think so, definitely. Yeah, you've got to have fun on the way, otherwise what's the point? And I suppose doing the work I do, you don't know when it's going to end, so there's no point thinking, oh, I'll have fun in 10 years' time when I've done X, Y, and Z. It might not come.
Have you, this might not be a question you can answer, but have you had any really interesting experiences whilst doing this kind of work? You know, something that you would think, something unusual or interesting?
I have. I can't go into. To be honest, it's not as often as you might imagine. People tend to think, oh, we've got hilarious tales all the time about what Auntie Doris wants. You know, I mean, I've had people want to leave odd things in their will, and people who've got what I would consider to be possibly odd wishes for them to happen to them on death, but they're quite rare, to be honest. And I wouldn't want to, because some of those people might be there to see this, so I wouldn't want to divulge more than that.
No, it was a really unfair question, to be honest, okay. But it was just an interesting thing. It's just, I guess, in a way, you've answered it in the fact that these things do happen, but obviously we can't really talk about it because it's quite personal to some people. So yeah, no, I get that. So if I wanted to work with you, I know the answer to this, obviously, but if I want to work with you, Sarah, how do I get in contact with you? Where's the best place? How do I connect?
Via LinkedIn, direct message me. I will get a website up and running. I need to do that.
No. Are you okay me sharing your LinkedIn profile, because I can put that?
Yeah. Just with a government health warning. If anyone wants to look at my LinkedIn profile and posts, there might be an over 18s advisory thing on it first. But
yeah, I have to say that some of them are. You have to have a certain sense of humour to actually.
They're not for everyone, but then that's a good way of qualifying out people that wouldn't be suitable clients, isn't it? I think, because if they don't like the humour in the way it's written, then maybe they're not the sort of clients that would be great for me. And I don't think anything is too abrasive on there anymore. Don't
No,
think so.
no, no. I don't think there is, but it's an interesting way of sort of helping people the way that you do. That humour does kind of diffuse it a little bit. I think that's what I like about the way that you work, because it is for better choice of words, it is a dry subject.
Oh
It's not,
gosh, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not the sort of conversation I have with my mates. It's not
No,
something. It,
no, it's not down the pub talk, is it
no,
really?
it's not, and especially with me, as you know, I do work with the Strong Men charity,
Mhm.
which is a lot to do with bereavement, and
Yeah.
it's can be a really really stressful
Mhm.
experience, and it's a lot of long lasting repercussions from it.
Yeah.
Having been through those processes myself, and the way that you do things and help people sort of approach
Mhm.
this subject, I think is a great way of doing it, and I think that that's what's important.
Yeah, thank you. And there are, even when the conversations that, like I say, quite often it starts off, the intro to it's quite amusing and, it's quite light, but we do touch on things when I'm having conversations with clients. One of the sort of toughest bits is to sort of say to them, well, in the event of one of your children dying, what would you want to happen to their share? And, there's sort of questions like that that I have to ask, and they're not nice, and you can't joke about those sorts of things, but they have to be covered. So it's kind of, you say it and then you move on, and then try and, I say try and lighten up the process as we go on, because we'll talk about all the sort of things you want in the will, and then there's a basic section about funeral requests. So then I'll just sort of say to people, well, I'm going to bring the tone down even more. Sorry if you weren't depressed enough. It's talking about your funeral, and then reinforcing to people that they need to think about letting people know whether they want to be buried or cremated, because it's a bit late to be telling people that, for them to find out that you want to be buried if they've just cremated you. So sort of little things like that kind of lift it a bit then, because you don't want to get too bogged down in the doom and gloom, but at the same time there's no skirting around it. You have to accept that there's some tough issues, and it does brings up tough issues with people when you're talking about the will, because it makes them reflect on experiences they've had with loved ones, or they might have gone through a situation where something hasn't gone right in the will, somebody's been disinherited that shouldn't be, or brings up, particularly quite often I'd say uh, almost half of the people I deal with have got at least one family member that they may want to exclude. So people have had lost contact with their children, and obviously whether it's a child dying, or just losing contact with them, it's still a form of grief, isn't it? So I think definitely, you're right, there's difficult conversations in there, so approaching it.
Yeah, I think the point that I think I'd like to make on that is that bereavement and grief is bad enough, and
Mhm.
people can struggle with it. I've
Yeah,
struggled with it
definitely.
myself, but it also excuse me, it also shows me the importance of having things like this in place, because although you've got to have those difficult conversations, it's proactive in the sense
Mm,
that you're in control. When it happens after the fact, when
mm,
there's all that emotion going, there's all that loss and all that grief, and
yeah.
then it mixed up with all the legal stuff, it's going to be
Mm,
all, it's just going to
yeah.
add to all those stresses. So for me, I think it's really important to have these things in place, and it's a great message, and
Yeah.
it's an interesting conversation today. So
Yes. Yeah. And it's just about giving people peace of mind at the end of the day, isn't it? And I think I would like to hope so. And I think it is, it's what my clients tell me, is that it is like a weight sort of lifted, because you've done it then, like you say, everything's been set in place, and they haven't got to worry about it anymore. Obviously, you can get on with living instead of worrying about dying. And, it's been addressed and put it to rest. And, yeah, so it gives peace of mind to clients.
yeah, and it's that peace of mind that's going to be less impactful
Mhm.
when things do happen. I mean, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today? Any sort of final words of wisdom before we sort of wrap up?
Well, I've got a speech prepared here. No, I haven't really. I don't think. No, I haven't got. Just do it. Do it now, as someone we know would say. Um, but
Yes.
yeah, no. Just bite the bullet, and you. I would say to people, I think whatever it is, not just your will or anything, but do it. And then once it's done, it's just tick it off and it's done then, and it's not, I wouldn't say most things you worry about are never as bad as you think they're going to be, are they? So yeah, just get on and do it.
Words. I don't know where some of that comes from, but you're absolutely right. I think that, as I said right at the beginning of the conversation, having a will or a lasting power of attorney are things that we really, really should have in place.
Yeah.
For so many positive reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still one of those things that
people put off. But yeah, try and tell people to make it urgent as well as important. that's the thing. Get that message across. Get it done.
Fantastic. I mean, it's, as I say, it's been an interesting episode today, because
I hope so.
The most lively of, live, that's probably the wrong word as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's the most interesting conversation. Yeah, it is so important, and I'm glad that we've actually come on. How have you found it today?
It's been good, thank you. Not as bad as I feared. Yeah.
Your point, exactly. It's get it done, get over and done with, and all the best with it. So,
thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Graham.
Brilliant. I'm so glad you have. All I'd say is that anybody listening, Sarah, if you want to sort of have a look at wills and lasting power of attorney and estate planning, and you're a little bit sort of put off by the idea, not afraid to have a little bit of humour, please do look up Sarah on LinkedIn, because her posts are really, really good. And I think you really should write a book about it one day.
Oh, I forgot to mention that. That is on my, I should have said that on my list of things. Sorry. Yeah.
Me wrapping up, and we've got a book.
It's on my, I have started it, and that's on my goal to get that done and out by next year. I've started it. It's Sassy Sarah's Guide to Writing a Will. And sorry, dropped that in at the end, didn't I? Yeah.
Hey, how could you not talk about that?
All about it, sorry.
Was it pressure from other people saying you need to write a book, Sarah? You need to write a book, or was it something that really there?
There's been the odd comment, but perhaps a bit of that, and then also my own, because like I said to you earlier, because I enjoy the writing, thinking it's a way of, again, bringing a bit of a dull, dry subject to life, and hopefully getting the importance of it across to people. So yes, book is in the offing.
Fantastic. I will be looking forward to when that comes out. Is there any rough dates, or are we just sort of looking?
Oh, there was a date, but that's been and gone. There's been a lot of other stuff that I've needed to sort, but it's on there. I'll get you a signed copy when it's done. Don't worry, Graham.
Oh, thank you very much. Definitely. And I'll say when that comes out, we'll get you back on and we can talk about that.
Thank you. That'd be lovely.
Brilliant. Yeah, we needed to get your little plug in right at the end there. Brilliant, Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a few things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody listening hasn't got a will in place, lasting power of attorney, all those kinds of things, please, please, please do so, because it is very, very important, as you've heard today. What's your line?
Put the fun back into dying.
It's a good one. But yeah, please look up Sarah on LinkedIn. Get your wills in place, and all the best. So thanks ever so much, and thanks for coming.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Graham. Enjoyable, very enjoyable.